Hey there, you ever look at some CPA firms and wonder how they manage to grow so smoothly, while for others, growth just feels like chaos? Well, it turns out the secret isn't what you might think. It's not just about hiring more people. Today, we're going to dig into why the smartest firms are building better systems, not just bigger teams. All right, let's jump in.
So, let me ask you this, right off the bat. Does this feel a little too familiar? You're landing new clients, which is awesome, right? But instead of feeling that sense of progress, it just feels like you're piling on more complexity, more stress. If you're nodding along, you are definitely not alone. That feeling is actually a huge red flag for a much deeper problem.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Our gut reaction when we're drowning in work is always, we need more people, we need more staff. But the real problem, the thing lurking just beneath the surface, is almost always an outdated operational system that just wasn't built for today's world. It's a systems problem, not a people problem.
So, let's look at where this really puts the squeeze on a firm. First up, the constant regulatory updates. You know this. Tax laws, compliance rules, they never sit still. They're always changing. And expecting your internal team to keep up with every single update while also juggling their day-to-day work, that is a recipe for complete overwhelm. It's this massive invisible drain on your firm's energy.
And what does that lead to? Well, something I'm sure we've all seen, the dreaded review bottleneck. The work gets prepared, but then it just sits there, piling up on a senior partner's desk, waiting for that final sign-off. Come tax season, this one little choke point can bring the entire firm to a grinding halt. It's stressful, it causes delays, it's just a nightmare.
And of course, we have to talk about the human cost. When your systems are inefficient, it's your people who end up paying the price. They're the ones working insane hours, dealing with that nonstop pressure, and just feeling completely burned out after every single deadline. That's not sustainable, and it's a direct result of trying to solve a system issue with brute force. So if you're seeing this cycle of burnout and bottlenecks, you're probably thinking, okay, why can't we just hire our way out of this? That's what firms have always done. Well, let's talk about why that traditional model is really starting to hit its limits. The challenges are pretty clear, right? First off, finding qualified professionals is getting tougher and tougher. The talent pool is just shrinking. And when you do find someone great, the time it takes to get them fully up to speed is a huge investment. All the while, you're adding these fixed payroll costs that just sit on your books, which is super inefficient when you've got those crazy seasonal spikes in work.
So, what's the answer? It's about a fundamental shift in thinking. It's time to move away from that old, rigid staffing model and start building a truly scalable system. We can call it a flexible delivery model. This is all about being strategic instead of just being reactive.
And here it is. At the core of this model is what we call strategic outsourcing. And pay attention to that wording. This is not just about offloading a few tasks. It is an operational system. It's about intelligently blending your firm's own expertise with specialized external teams to manage your workload with incredible agility. It's architecture, not just delegation. Now, a huge piece of this new architecture involves tapping into global talent. Over the last decade, places like India have developed these incredibly specialized teams. And we're not talking about general bookkeepers. These are pros who are trained specifically on U.S. tax law, U.S. audit standards, and U.S. compliance. They are purpose-built to plug right into an American firm. And look, this is not just basic data entry. These teams are handling seriously complex stuff: audit work papers, U.S. tax prep, compliance documentation, you name it. And what that does is free up your senior staff to focus on what they do best: high-level review, client strategy, and building relationships. You know, the highest value work.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's walk through how this kind of system solves two of the absolute biggest headaches for CPA firms today.
First up, the one we all know and love, or dread, personal tax season. The volume just explodes, the deadlines are set in stone, and accuracy is everything. This is exactly where internal teams often just hit a wall. But a smart, flexible system, it can absorb this spike without breaking a sweat.
So here's how that works. The workflow is actually really clear and controlled. First, data is transferred securely. Then, the offshore team does the heavy lifting, all the preparation plus their own internal quality checks. And then, the prepared returns come back to your in-house team for that crucial final review and filing. You keep full control right where it matters most.
Okay, next up, payroll. This is a service where clients have zero tolerance for mistakes. One error, one missed deadline, and that client's trust can be gone in an instant. It's a super high-stakes, repetitive process that can secretly eat up a ton of your internal team's time.
But when you integrate outsourced support for payroll, you get some huge wins.
You immediately improve your accuracy because you're using proven standardized processes. You slash your compliance risk by leaning on specialists who live and breathe this stuff. You free your team from that tedious, repetitive work. And, this is a big one, you can offer payroll as a profitable service without having to hire a whole dedicated internal team to do it.
You know, there's another benefit here that people often miss, and it's huge: standardization. When you team up with a quality offshore partner, you're not just getting more manpower. You're actually adopting their documented workflows, their checklists, their quality controls. And this makes your service delivery way more consistent and way less dependent on any one person in your office.
Of course, and this is really important, none of this works if you don't have the right partner. So what should you actually be looking for? Let's break down the absolute key criteria that the most successful firms focus on when they build out this kind of system.
These 5 points are totally non-negotiable. You need a partner with US-specific expertise so they get all the nuances. You need clear, defined processes so you always have visibility and control. Rock-solid data security, well, that's just a given. You need support that's scalable so they can ramp up for tax season and then dial back. And finally, you want a true partnership mindset, someone who's invested in your success, not just checking off a task.
All right, let's just quickly tackle a few common fears that pop up. The biggest one is this idea that outsourcing means you lose control. Honestly, that's a myth. Like we saw with a tax workflow, your firm always keeps the final review authority. You're outsourcing the execution, not the oversight.
The second myth is that this is just for, simple low-level tasks. We've totally debunked that already. These are experienced, specialized teams built to handle complex tax, audit, and compliance work. The whole point is to free up your senior staff to operate at a higher, more strategic level. And finally, there's this fear that it's all just too complicated and difficult to manage. With the right partner, the exact opposite is true. Their clear, documented workflows and communication plans actually make collaboration seamless, sometimes even more efficient than your purely internal processes. So let's bring it all home to this one central idea. The CPA firms that are going to win in the future, they aren't going to be the ones who are simply working harder or pulling more all-nighters. They're going to be the ones that have built smarter, more resilient, and truly scalable systems.
And that really just leaves us with one last question for you to think about. When you look at your firm's current operations, your bottlenecks, your plans for growth, is your firm really architected for the future? Or is it still running on a model that was built for the past?